"Grandpa, I heard Mommy and Daddy talking. They want to take your house and money." My 8-year-old grandson's voice trembled as he confided in me on the porch. His innocent warning hit me like a bolt of lightning, shattering the comfortable lie I'd been living in. I'd trusted my only son with everything, but in that moment I realized how deep their betrayal ran. Heartbroken and shaken, I left their home early that night, masking my hurt behind a feigned headache. What I did next, an intricate plan to protect myself and my legacy, would turn the tables on their scheme. I outsmarted them at their own game, and they would never forget the consequences of their greed. Before we dive deeper, don't forget to subscribe and drop a comment letting us know where you're tuning in from. "Dad, we'd love to have you over for dinner this weekend. It's been too long," my son Michael had said just a few days earlier over the phone. The call came unexpectedly on a Wednesday evening. I remember because I was sitting alone at my kitchen table, eating leftover stew, when the phone rang. Michael's voice carried an unfamiliar mix of eagerness and strain. "That sounds nice, son," I replied, pleasantly surprised. Family dinners had become rare since my wife passed away 3 years ago. In my loneliness, I'd longed for more time with Michael, his wife Claire, and my 2 grandchildren. Perhaps this was a sign our family was growing closer again. "There's actually something important we'd like to discuss while you're here," Michael added, trying to sound casual. "Nothing to worry about, just some family planning stuff." I paused, spoon halfway to my mouth. Important discussions and family planning? This wasn't how our family usually operated. We were close on the surface, but rarely did we schedule formal talks. A slight chill crept into my chest. "Oh. What sort of family planning?" I asked lightly, hiding my curiosity. On the other end, I heard a brief rustle, and I could have sworn I heard Claire whispering something in the background. There was a muffled sound, as if the phone had been covered for a moment. When my son spoke again, his tone was overly bright. "Just some ideas about the future," he said. "You know, making sure everything is set up right for you and the kids. Estate stuff, maybe." Now alarm bells started to ring faintly in my mind. I'd handled my own finances and estate just fine so far. Why were they suddenly interested? Still, I brushed the feeling aside. Maybe they were genuinely concerned about me. After all, I was nearing 70, and it wouldn't be unreasonable for my son to want to talk about long-term plans. "All right," I said cautiously. "We can talk about whatever you and Claire have in mind." "Great. How about Saturday at 6? Come a bit early, maybe 5:30, so we can chat before dinner." "The kids are excited to see you too," Michael replied. I agreed and hung up, the stew in front of me now cold. I stared at the phone for a long minute. My reflection in the darkened kitchen window showed a furrowed brow and tired eyes. Ever since my wife Ellen died, I had been trying to keep the family close. Ellen was the glue that held us together, and without her, I sometimes felt like a guest in my son's life rather than his father. Perhaps this dinner was a turning point. Maybe Claire and Michael truly wanted to ensure I was taken care of as I got older. Still, something about that call needled at me. Claire had never been particularly warm with me. She was polite, yes, and I had welcomed her into our family with open arms. But over the years I sensed a distance. She often urged Michael to be more involved in decisions about my life, like when she suggested I sell my house soon after Ellen's funeral because it's too much house for one person. I remember that moment vividly. We were standing in my living room after the funeral reception, the air heavy with grief and the scent of sympathy flowers. I was staring at a portrait of Ellen on the mantel, wondering how I would possibly go on without her, when Claire sidled up next to me. In a soft voice, she said, "This is such a lovely home, Edward. But it's a lot to maintain alone. Have you considered maybe downsizing? It might be easier, and you wouldn't be all by yourself in a big empty house." The comment was framed as concern, but it felt oddly timed and calculated. At the time I was too emotionally wrecked to respond, and Michael quickly shushed her, saying, "Not now, hon, I hadn't forgotten that suggestion, though. In the 3 years since, there had been other little remarks. Claire would notice a loose step on my porch and mention assisted living facilities where maintenance isn't your worry. She'd comment on news stories about elderly people mismanaging their finances, then casually remind me that I could always ask for help if balancing checkbooks became too hard. I wasn't sure if she truly cared or if she saw me as an increasingly burdensome old man sitting on assets they could use. That thought brought guilt. I didn't want to assume the worst of my own family. So I always thanked her for her concern and said I was managing fine. Saturday came around quickly. That afternoon, I baked an apple pie to bring over. I recall slicing the Granny Smith apples in my quiet kitchen, trying to ignore the nervous flutter in my stomach. It felt almost like I was preparing for a business negotiation rather than a family dinner. As I peeled apples, I thought about my grandchildren. Lucas, the older one, was 16 and busy with high school and sports, but he'd always been a good kid, attentive and kind to his grandpa. Little Sophie was 8, bright as a button, and attached to me at the hip whenever I visited. Those kids were my joy. In fact, I had been helping financially to ensure they had a good life, paying for Lucas's baseball league fees and tutors, and Sophie's dance classes and private school tuition. Over the last couple of years, those expenses had started as occasional help but grew more regular. Just until we get on our feet, Michael often said with a sheepish smile when asking for another check to cover their mortgage or a surprise home repair. I never refused. What else is a father for if not to support his son when he's struggling? But it was true that the amounts had grown. From a few hundred for a utility bill once, to $1,000 for a leaky roof, to several thousand to cover their mortgage when Michael lost his job briefly last year. All told, I suspected I had given them tens of thousands by now. I never kept strict track. I told myself it was all out of love. I slid the pie into the oven and checked my watch. If I left by 5, I'd arrive at their house by 5:30 as requested. I wondered again what this family planning conversation would entail. Perhaps they wanted to talk about my will or powers of attorney. I had a standard will that left everything to Michael, with some funds earmarked for the grandkids' education. Michael knew that. We discussed it loosely after Ellen died, when updating our estate documents. There shouldn't be any issues. As I got ready to go, I caught a glimpse of the old family photo on my sideboard, me, Ellen, and a young Michael at Disney World, all of us grinning ear to ear. A happier time. I felt a pang in my chest, missing Ellen's steady presence. She always had a way of seeing straight through to people's real intentions. In our last weeks together, she'd made me promise to look after the grandchildren, and then she added something cryptic: "Don't let anyone take advantage of your good heart, Ed, especially not family." At the time I'd shushed her, not wanting to think ill of anyone, but those words echoed now. I arrived at Michael and Claire's suburban home right on time. Their house was a modern 2-story in a pleasant neighborhood. Claire opened the door before I even reached it, almost as if she'd been watching for my car. "Dad! So good to see you," she exclaimed, giving me an airy hug. Her smile was wide and her voice syrupy sweet. Come in, come in." I stepped inside, immediately greeted by the warm smell of roast chicken and herbs. It felt welcoming, yet something in the air was tense. "Grandpa." Sophie barreled down the hallway and flung herself at my legs. I laughed and scooped her up into a hug. "There's my little lady." I kissed her forehead. "My, you've grown since I saw you 2 weeks ago." Sophie giggled and wriggled free. "I'm 8 now, Grandpa. I'm practically a grown-up." I chuckled. "Don't rush it, sweetheart. You'll be all grown soon enough." Lucas appeared around the corner, taller than ever and with the lanky, slightly awkward look of a teenager not quite settled into his body. "Hey, Grandpa," he said with a grin. He offered a quick, one-armed hug, trying to play it cool, but I could see the genuine affection in his eyes. "How's school, champ?" I asked, ruffling his hair lightly. He groaned at the hair tousle but smiled. "It's good. We made the playoffs in baseball, I got a couple B's up to A's, things are okay. I'm proud of you, I said sincerely. We chatted a minute about his courses until Claire gently steered the kids away. Lucas, why don't you help your sister wash up for dinner? We'll call you when it's ready. Her tone made it clear the children were being dismissed for now. As the kids headed upstairs, I took off my coat and handed Claire the still warm apple pie I'd brought. Oh, you didn't have to bring anything, she gushed. It's just a little something for dessert, I said. In the dining room, the table was set with the nice china and cloth napkins. That was unusual for a casual family Saturday. Usually it was paper plates in front of the TV for these informal dinners, whenever they rarely happened. They were making a statement with this setting. Michael came in from the kitchen carrying a dish of roasted vegetables. Dad! Glad you made it, he said, as if I might not have. He gave me a quick hug, though his eyes were anxious. Smells delicious, I said, sniffing the rosemary from the chicken that Claire was bringing out. We sat down to eat, and at first, the conversation was pleasantly normal. The kids came back and we all talked about Lucas's baseball games, Sophie's dance recital coming up next month, and even a funny story about the family dog chasing a squirrel that had everyone laughing. I almost forgot my suspicions in the warmth of that moment. This was what I had missed dearly, family sharing everyday life. Yet, as dinner progressed, I noticed that Michael and Claire exchanged loaded glances each time the conversation drifted or a lull fell. They were anxious to get to their planned topic, it seemed, but were waiting for the right time, probably until after the meal or when the kids weren't listening. Sure enough, as soon as we finished the main course and I offered to help clear the plates, Claire shook her head. Oh no, you just relax. Lucas and I will get this cleaned up, won't we? She gave her son a nudge. Lucas began stacking plates, and I rose to help anyway, but Michael touched my shoulder lightly. Actually, Dad, how about we let them tidy up? We can go sit in the living room for a bit. I wanted to chat about that thing we mentioned on the phone. Here it was. I swallowed and nodded. All right. I followed him to the living room. My heart rate picked up. I realized my palms were slightly sweaty. Whatever this was, I had a feeling it wasn't going to be pleasant. We sat down on their sofa. I sank into the familiar cushions. This was the couch I had lent them the money to buy a few years back when they moved in. Funny how nearly every nice thing in this house had a connection to my wallet, the leather sofa, the new fridge, the kids' computer. Claire finished directing the cleanup and soon joined us, wiping her hands on a towel nervously. To my surprise, Lucas trailed behind her, drying a plate. Clearly, he could sense something and was hesitant to be shut out. Claire gave him a gentle, "All done, honey." "Thank you. Why don't you take Sophie upstairs to pick a board game? We'll play with Grandpa after we talk, okay?" Lucas glanced at me and I caught a flicker of concern in his eyes. He was old enough to know when something serious was up. But he obeyed. "Sure, Mom." He disappeared toward the kitchen, and I heard him coaxing Sophie to head upstairs. Suddenly, it felt like an invisible curtain fell, marking the shift from family time to business. Michael cleared his throat. He sat on the armchair across from me while Claire took a seat beside him, perched forward. Both of them were looking at me with what they probably thought were expressions of concern, but I sensed calculation behind them. I broke the silence first. "So, what's on your minds, you two?" They traded another glance, as if deciding who should speak. Claire took the lead. "We've been thinking a lot about you, Dad," she began, her voice honeyed but a bit too earnest. "You're living alone in that big house, and, well, we worry. It's a lot to manage, and you're not getting any younger." I forced myself to smile politely. "I appreciate the concern. But I'm doing all right. I still mow my lawn and drive and whatnot. Is something specific troubling you?" Michael jumped in. "We just want to make sure you're safe and comfortable. We've heard about some great retirement communities, or if you prefer staying at home, maybe having us help more with finances and errands. We just want to take some of the burden off you. I felt a small tightness in my chest. This was sounding awfully familiar, nearly word for word what Claire had hinted before. I'm managing my finances fine, son. But I do get the house can be a lot. Are you suggesting I move out of my home? Not right away, unless you want to, Claire interjected smoothly. But it's wise to plan early. Perhaps you could give someone you trust the ability to help manage things. You know, in case you ever can't handle them on your own. Her eyes were locked on mine, unblinking. I realized my throat had gone dry. She was talking about legal control, power of attorney or something along those lines. I hedged. Are you talking about power of attorney, Claire? That's a big step. Only for emergencies, she said quickly. For instance, say you had a health issue and bills needed paying or decisions made quickly. If we already had the authority to step in, it would save a lot of trouble. It's just being prepared, like a will or insurance. I looked at my son. Is this your idea too, Michael? He rubbed the back of his neck. Mostly Claire's. But I see the point. We really do have your best interests at heart, Dad. And the truth is, the way things are structured now, if something happened to you, it could be messy. We might have to go through courts to make decisions on your behalf, for medical or financial matters. You wouldn't want that. It was subtle, but the implication was clear. They wanted me to sign over proactive control, just in case. I felt myself instinctively bristling. I'm still perfectly capable, I said a bit more sharply than intended. I don't think this is necessary yet. Maybe not yet, Edward, Claire said, maintaining a calm facade. But these arrangements are best done before they're needed. We wouldn't actually do anything unless it was absolutely necessary. You'd still handle everything as normal. We'd just be there as backup, Michael added. Backup that could legally override me, I thought. This was moving too fast and setting off too many alarms now. I noticed Claire had a folder on the coffee table. She must have brought it when she came in. Her manicured fingers tapped it lightly, almost subconsciously. I had a hunch it contained legal papers ready for my signature. They came prepared. I took a slow breath, pretending to consider. Inside, I felt a mix of anger, fear, and deep sadness. But I knew if I confronted them head-on right now, I'd get nowhere except a bitter fight. One thing I'd learned in 40 years of business negotiations was that letting the other party show their hand without revealing your own cards can be invaluable. So I decided to play along just enough, without committing to anything. I understand why you're bringing this up, I said, softening my tone. It's responsible to plan ahead. It's just a lot to think about for me. Could you give me some time to consider all this? Michael glanced at Claire, who pursed her lips slightly. She was clearly eager to get those signatures now, but she didn't want to spook me by pushing too hard overtly. Of course, Dad, my son said after a second. We didn't expect you to decide on the spot tonight. Maybe just read through some information, Claire said, sliding the folder a few inches toward me. We gathered some pamphlets and documents you might review at home. No pressure. There was pressure, she just wanted to make it seem like my decision when it was really them steering me. I picked up the folder. Inside, I saw a printed brochure for a high-end senior living facility, some financial planning pamphlet, and indeed, a stapled sheaf of papers titled Durable Power of Attorney, with small yellow flags where signatures would go. My heart pounded painfully at the sight. I forced myself not to react. Thank you, I said, managing a faint smile. I'll read these over. Claire gave me that sugary smile again and patted my hand. We really do want what's best for you. And for the kids too, if we know your wishes and have things legally in order, it protects everyone. We wouldn't want any confusion if, heaven forbid, something happened. Her words were kind, but I caught the underlying message. it protects everyone, meaning it protected their interests in my assets from any confusion. I nodded. Yes, of course. It's good to be prepared. Michael looked relieved that I wasn't fighting them outright. Perhaps they took my calmness as compliance. But I saw both of them really studying me, likely trying to gauge if I suspected anything. I made sure my expression was simply one of a tired, slightly overwhelmed old man. We sat in awkward silence for a moment. I placed the folder back on the table, not signing anything. They seemed a bit disappointed that I didn't just start filling it out, but they couldn't well insist without betraying their eagerness. Finally, I stood up. I think I need a glass of water, I said. Mind if I use the restroom for a minute? Sure, Dad, Michael said, standing as well. Down the hall, as you know. I wandered to the bathroom just to gather myself. I locked the door and took several deep breaths, gripping the sink. In the mirror, I saw that my face had gone pale. My worst fears were confirmed by those documents. They wanted to legally take control. And given the mention of, if something happened to me, they might not be planning to wait quietly until an actual emergency. They could manufacture one, claim I was incompetent or get a doctor's note or, who knows. One thing was clear, I had to handle this carefully. I turned on the tap and splashed water on my face. As I dried off, I heard muffled voices outside the door. It sounded like Michael and Claire, speaking in urgent whispers. I couldn't make out what they were saying, but the tone was frustrated. Perhaps they were debating why I didn't just sign now, or planning next steps. I flushed and came out, acting normal. Everything okay? I asked lightly as I returned to the living room. Both of them were standing, close together. They startled slightly. Fine. Claire said too brightly. Michael forced a smile. He glanced at the clock on the wall. It was only 7:15, but I suddenly felt bone-tired. I'm actually not feeling too well, I lied, pressing a hand to my forehead. A bit of a headache coming on. Do you mind if we cut the evening short? I'm sorry to rush off, but I think I should get home and rest. Concern flashed across my son's face, but behind it I also saw panic. Panic that I might slip out of their grasp tonight. Oh, I'm sorry you're not feeling well. Maybe you should lie down here for a bit. We still have dessert and the kids were hoping to play a game. He trailed off. I shook my head gently. I think I'd better go home. Rain, check on dessert, sweetheart, I called to Sophie, who I realized was peeking from the top of the stairs. Claire bit her lip. But Dad, the papers, I'll take them with me and read them, don't worry, I assured, picking up the folder from the coffee table. We can talk more soon. Perhaps tomorrow or Monday after I've reviewed everything carefully. This was an unexpected move and they had to regroup. Michael frowned slightly. Tomorrow? Well, tomorrow's Sunday. I suppose we could. Actually, maybe it's better sooner rather than later while it's fresh in your mind. We could come by your house in the morning and discuss it further. He was pushing to meet immediately. Maybe worried I'd consult someone or change my mind if given too long. I forced a tired smile. We'll see. Let me call you in the morning. If I feel better, sure, we can chat again then. Claire opened her mouth as if to protest, but I turned toward the stairs. Sophie, Lucas, come give Grandpa a hug, I'm going to head home now. There was a flurry of movement. Sophie flew down the stairs, and Lucas followed more slowly. Sophie looked disappointed. You're leaving already? We didn't even have pie. I know, sweetheart. I promise we'll have pie next time. Grandpa's just feeling a bit under the weather. I kneeled to hug her. As I did, she whispered softly in my ear, I heard Mommy and Daddy. They're mad. Mommy said she's not going to let you ruin everything. Her little voice quivered. She said tomorrow you have to do something, or else. I pulled back to look into her wide, worried brown eyes. My heart nearly stopped. Sophie had overheard them after all. At 8 years old, she likely didn't understand the full context, but she grasped enough to be scared. I mustered a smile and brushed a strand of hair from her face. "Don't worry about grown-up things, okay? I'll take care of it. Everything will be all right." She nodded uncertainly and I kissed her cheek. Lucas hovered nearby, pretending not to have heard that exchange. But the tension on his face told me he probably had. I stood up and he stepped forward to hug me more tightly than usual. He whispered just as quietly, "Be careful, Grandpa. Something's off. Call me if you need anything, okay? I can drive over any time." My throat tightened. I had no words for a moment. I simply patted his back and whispered, "Thank you. I'll be okay." I straightened, now feeling a surge of resolve. Between Sophie's fearful innocence and Lucas's protective concern, I knew I couldn't afford to falter. These kids needed me to stand up for myself, and ultimately for them, too, because if their parents could do this to me, what lessons would that teach my grandchildren about family and greed? Claire and Michael had walked to the front door with me. They looked anxious as they realized I was indeed leaving. Michael handed me my coat. "Call us if you need anything tonight, all right?" he said, a little too heartily. "And about tomorrow, I'll be in touch," I cut in gently. "Let's see how I'm feeling." "Good night, you too." Claire forced another smile. "Good night. Feel better." I stepped out into the crisp night air. The door closed behind me and I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. I felt unsteady as I walked to my car, my mind racing. The scene replayed in my head, the coaxing voices, the documents, and most of all Sophie's frightened whisper. I opened my car door, but before getting in I glanced back at the house. In the front window, I saw movement. Michael and Claire were talking, their silhouettes animated. They hadn't expected me to slip from their trap so easily tonight. I wondered what, or else, meant in what Sophie heard. Or else they'd try to force the issue. Or else they'd find another way. As I drove home through the dark, quiet streets, a storm of emotions swirled in me. Anger, betrayal, sorrow. How could my own child do this? How had we come to this point? By the time I pulled into my own driveway, my sadness had hardened into determination. I could crumble, weep and wallow in, "Why me?" Or I could take action. And I hadn't spent decades building a life and providing for my family just to roll over when someone tried to take it all away. Inside my house, the silence was heavy and expectant. In the foyer, I paused at the family portrait hanging there, all of us together last Christmas, smiling. I felt a bitterness knowing that even then, perhaps, they'd been considering this. I went straight to my home office and set the folder Claire gave me on my desk like a venomous snake. Carefully, I went through each document in it, studying their plan in black and white. A durable power of attorney that, if I had signed, would give Michael broad control over my finances and healthcare should he decide I was unfit. The fine print wasn't lost on me. Depending on the wording, sometimes these forms could be exercised immediately or upon certain conditions. If they had prepared it with immediate effect, my signing it tonight would have handed them the keys to my kingdom right away. I checked. Thankfully, it required a notary's seal and witness signatures, and specified it took effect only upon incapacitation as certified by a physician. At least they didn't have my signature, or the notary. Yet. They likely hoped to take me to a doctor, get some note about my confusion, or fabricate a reason to activate it. The assisted living brochure was glossy and depicted cheerful seniors in a rec room. Was the plan to schmooze me into one of those places once they had power of attorney? Sell my house, put me there, and pocket the rest? It seemed plausible. Then I noticed something else in the folder's pocket, a business card for a law firm. Tilting it toward the lamp, I read, Harrington and Lowe, Elder Law Specialists. On the back, an appointment date was scribbled for next Tuesday. They had actually scheduled a meeting with an elder law attorney, presumably to initiate guardianship or finalize these documents if I hadn't signed by then. My stomach turned. This was a full-fledged operation. It wasn't a spur-of-the-moment idea, it was meticulously planned. That hurt even more, knowing they'd been plotting behind my back with professionals. I reached out to my oldest friend, Alan, who was also a semi-retired attorney. He confirmed my worst fears and helped me plan my response late into the night. Together, we decided I needed to protect myself and document everything. By the time I hung up, I had a clear strategy: secure my finances, gather proof of what had been happening, and confront Michael and Claire with unbiased witnesses present. Before going to bed, I sat at my desk poring over financial records, making a list of every transaction and favor I'd done for Michael and Claire in recent years. With growing dismay, I tallied it up, nearly $85,000 given or lent, often with no repayment. It spanned everything: mortgage payments, car repairs, medical bills, private school tuition for Sophie, each request justified by some family emergency or opportunity that seemed reasonable at the time. Sitting there surrounded by the evidence of their manipulation, I finally saw the pattern clearly. The escalating requests hadn't just been due to their bad luck, it had been conditioning, training me to say yes to increasingly larger amounts. And Claire's suggestions about assisted living hadn't been concern for my welfare. They were reconnaissance for the power grab they attempted that night. By the time I crawled into bed around 2 a.m., sleep eluded me. I lay there restlessly until dawn, heart aching but resolve hardening. Morning dawned gray and drizzly, matching the heaviness in my heart. Yet there was also a sense of anticipation. By the end of this day, I'd have this confrontation behind me, one way or another. At 9:50, Beth arrived. She was a cheery woman in her 50s, and I could tell she was curious why I needed her on a Sunday. I had only told her it was some family documents requiring a notary and witness. She set her notary journal and seal on the side table in my living room and assured me she'd be discreet. A few minutes later, I saw Michael and Claire's car pull up outside. I greeted them at the door as if nothing were amiss. They came in all smiles and concern. Michael even put on an exaggerated, worried son face as he asked how I was feeling. They entered and immediately noticed Beth sitting at the dining table just off the living room, her notary journal open. That gave them brief pause. "This is Beth," I said casually. "She's a notary, as you'll need one for the power of attorney forms, right?" I fixed an innocent gaze at Claire. Claire recovered from surprise quickly and stepped forward to shake Beth's hand. "Oh. Yes, of course. That's very thoughtful, Dad." Her smile was tight. Michael gave a thin-lipped grin as well. I could almost see the two of them recalibrating. Maybe they hadn't arranged a notary yet and figured they'd do it at a bank or something later. My proactive approach might have thrown them, but they couldn't object without seeming suspicious. We all sat in the living room, I on my armchair, them on the couch. Beth remained politely at the dining table within view, pretending not to listen but clearly on standby. I started the conversation lightly. "So, I went over the materials you left. You two certainly did your homework on this eldercare planning idea." Michael flashed another uncertain smile. "We just want to make sure everything's in order for you, Dad." "How very considerate," I said, folding my hands. "Could you explain why exactly you think I'm no longer capable of managing my own affairs? Have I given any indication of struggling? Missed bills, confusion, anything of that sort?" They exchanged a quick look. Claire answered, "It's not that you're not capable now, it's just planning for the future. You've been healthy, yes, but things can change quickly at your age. So it's only concern for the future." "Nothing about my present abilities," I followed up. "Yes," Michael said. "Only future what-ifs." I continued, "Then why were the two of you researching emergency conservatorship and how to declare someone incompetent?" That landed like a grenade. Both their faces went slack with shock. Claire recovered first, feigning ignorance. "I'm sorry. What are you referring to?" I snapped the binder shut. If you truly meant nothing by it, why hide it? Why not openly discuss these concerns with me? Instead you orchestrated this secret meeting with lawyers, got documents drafted in advance, and tried to catch me off guard. That's not the behavior of loving caregivers. That's the behavior of conspirators. Michael stood up abruptly, his hands trembling. Dad, we never intended to hurt you. We were worried. You've been forgetful lately, mixing up dates. His voice was pleading now, but also desperate. I held up a hand. My voice grew colder. A little forgetfulness doesn't justify taking away someone's freedom, Michael. And I see what's really going on here. I gestured around at my home. This house, my savings, everything I built, you both can't wait for it, can you? You were going to force my hand, maybe even tuck me away somewhere, while you helped yourselves. Claire's eyes flashed anger at that. That's a terrible thing to say. We would never tuck you away. We wanted you in a nice place where you'd be cared for, where I'd be out of your way and you'd have the keys to everything, I interjected sharply. Beth cleared her throat from the dining table, looking very concerned now. It was obvious to her that this wasn't a harmonious family transaction. Michael's face crumpled, he found his voice again, though it came out thin and choked. Dad, we were only trying to help, you might not see it now, but we love you. My heart pounded. I was equal parts furious and heartbroken, but I kept my voice measured. Love doesn't involve conspiracy, Michael. Love doesn't mean researching how to steal someone's independence while they're still healthy and of sound mind. He opened his mouth, but no words came out. Claire stood abruptly, her facade of calm finally cracking. We do love you, Edward. We were worried about what would happen if you got ill suddenly. We've seen friends go through nightmares when their parents didn't plan ahead, spare me. I cut her off, voice like ice. You scheduled an appointment with an elder law attorney behind my back. You drafted papers to seize control of my life. Don't insult me by pretending it was purely out of concern. The silence that followed was heavy, broken only by Michael's ragged breathing. Both of them looked at me then, truly looked at me, perhaps realizing for the first time that I was not the weak, easily manipulated old man they'd counted on. What happens now? Michael whispered. I stood, feeling every year of my age, but also every ounce of the hard-earned wisdom and authority that age conferred. Now, I said, there are consequences. I retrieved a folder of documents I had prepared overnight, an updated will and a new trust. I have here, I said, raising the papers, a new estate plan. It places the majority of my assets into a trust for Lucas and Sophie. For their education, their futures. It will be managed by an independent trustee that I'll appoint, not by either of you. Upon my death, the house will also go into that trust for them. You, Michael, will inherit only a modest portion, contingent on certain conditions. Michael's eyes widened. Contingent? What conditions? I met my son's eyes, my voice unyielding. The condition is that you and Claire demonstrate genuine change over the next year or so. Let's say 1 year for now. If in 1 year's time I am satisfied that you have reformed, meaning you have steady employment, you're living within your means, and you show true remorse and change in how you treat me and your family, then I may consider revising this plan to include you in a more generous way. Claire stared at me, incredulous and angry. You can't do that. I can. I just did. And if you think of contesting it, remember that the evidence of your attempted exploitation is well documented. Any court challenge would bring all that to light. I spread the new will and trust documents across the coffee table. Beth, I need these witnessed and notarized, please. Beth approached, adjusted her glasses, and examined the documents briefly. She exchanged a sympathetic glance with me and then with professional efficiency notarized my signature as I signed the will and trust. I looked up at my son and daughter-in-law, who stood there in stunned silence. I pressed on. If you both formally renounce any claim to my estate and, more importantly, spend the next year truly becoming the kind of people who wouldn't do what you did, then after that I'll be open to revisiting these arrangements. But you have to prove it, through honest work, responsible spending, and prioritizing your children's well-being over your own greed." Harry buried his face in his hands. Claire's composure was gone. She looked on the verge of tears or screams or both. "How are we supposed to live without your support?" she demanded bitterly. "The same way millions of other families do, through honest work and living within your means. The extra check stopped today. The bailout stopped now. You're both adults with college degrees. Figure it out." Beth quietly finished her notary entries and closed her journal. "Everything is in order and legally binding," she said softly to me. "I'll leave these copies with you." "Thank you, Beth," I replied, managing a tight smile of gratitude. Beth gave a polite nod to Michael and Claire, who were too shell-shocked to respond, then made herself scarce, letting herself out the front door. After she left, the three of us remained in a loaded silence. Michael finally looked up at me, tears spilling down his cheeks. "I'm so sorry, Dad," he choked out. "I know that doesn't fix anything, but I am truly sorry." Claire said nothing, her eyes were fixed on the floor, jaw clenched. Whether she felt any remorse, I couldn't tell, and at that moment I didn't particularly care. Words came to me slowly as I looked at the two people I had loved most in the world, now nearly strangers. "I hope you are sorry," I said quietly. "I hope one day you understand how deeply you've hurt me. Because despite everything, I still love you, Michael. You're my son. And I even care about you, Claire, for the sake of this family. But I will not let what you attempted go without consequences." Michael nodded miserably. Claire closed her eyes, a tear finally escaping down her cheek. "I suggest you go home now," I said, exhaustion evident in my voice. "Take the rest of the day to reflect on what's happened. Hug your children. They're wonderful kids, they don't deserve any of this. And figure out how you'll explain to them why things might be different going forward." Michael looked like he might collapse from shame and sorrow. Claire put a hand on his arm and guided him toward the door. I followed them and opened it, the fresh air of late morning spilling into the tense atmosphere of the house. They stepped out onto my porch. Michael turned back to me, his face streaked with tears. "I'm so sorry," he whispered again. I simply nodded, my own heart too heavy for more words. "Goodbye." They walked to their car, Michael with shoulders hunched, Claire wiping her eyes angrily. I watched from the doorway until they drove off, then gently closed the door. Inside the quiet house, I finally allowed myself a long, unsteady breath. My hands were trembling ever so slightly as the adrenaline began to ebb. I sank into my armchair, suddenly exhausted. It was barely noon, but it felt like a lifetime since morning. I must have nodded off for a bit because the next thing I remember was hearing a knock at the door. I jolted up, heart quickening. Had they come back? But then I heard a familiar small voice. "Grandpa." "It's me, Sophie." I quickly went to open the door. There stood Sophie, still in her pajamas and a jacket hastily thrown over, her hair a mess of curls. Beside her was Lucas, car keys in hand. It looked like he had driven them over in the family's second car. That surprised me. Lucas only recently got his license and usually only drove under parent supervision. The fact he brought his sister here told me a lot. He was acting on his own. "Mom and Dad are arguing," he said by way of explanation, a little out of breath. "I thought it'd be better to get Sophie out of there for a bit. I hope that's okay." "Of course it's okay." I stepped aside and let them in, kneeling to hug Sophie, who looked confused and anxious. She peered up at me. "Grandpa, are you okay? Daddy was crying and Mommy was yelling after you left this morning. They said you're mad at them." I hugged her tightly, exchanging a look with Lucas over her shoulder. He looked upset and embarrassed. clearly having witnessed the aftermath at home. We all moved to sit on the sofa. Sophie climbed into my lap and Lucas sat close by, one arm protectively around his little sister. I took a deep breath. Your mom and dad made some mistakes that upset me. We had a serious talk about it, and there will be some changes. But I want you both to know, none of it is your fault. And I love you both more than anything, okay? Sophie nodded solemnly. Lucas rubbed his eyes, trying to be stoic, but I could see they were wet. They were talking about money, he said quietly. I heard them saying something about how they need your help and now you won't give it. And Mom said she was just doing what was necessary. Dad told her to stop, that they shouldn't have done it. So Michael had confessed at least partially in front of Lucas. That must have been painful for my son, but it was the right thing to do if he did. I won't drag you kids into the details, I replied gently. But yes, it was about money and about me taking care of myself. I decided I needed to set some boundaries with them. Are we still going to have enough money? Sophie asked innocently. For my school or for ice cream Saturdays? It broke my heart that she would even worry. At 8, she shouldn't be burdened by adult concerns, but clearly she had overheard enough over time to know Grandpa's money was important to their life. You will be fine, I assured her, stroking her hair. You both will always be taken care of. I've made sure of that. Lucas gave me a questioning look. I realized he was old enough to understand more. I set up something called a trust fund for you and your sister, I explained. That means I put aside money just for you two when you're older, college, maybe a first house or starting a business, whatever you might need when you're adults. That money is safe and no one can use it except for your benefit. He let out a breath, perhaps relieved. I suspected he'd been worrying about his college tuition or something if he knew his parents were struggling. Really, he said. So, we can still go to college. I was worried. His voice cracked slightly. 16, and already feeling the pressure of adult responsibilities. I pulled him into a one-armed hug while still holding Sophie close. Yes, you both will go to whatever college you want. I promise. That's why I did what I did, so you don't have to worry, and so your parents can't misuse that money. Sophie blinked. Use it for what? Lucas coughed gently. It's complicated, sophomore. But basically Grandpa made sure we have college money that Mom and Dad can't touch. Oh. She considered this, then nodded, as if it made sense to her in a simple way. After a moment, she looked up at me with those big eyes. Are Mommy and Daddy in trouble? I paused, considering how to answer. They're not in trouble with the law or anything like that. But they did something that broke my trust. That means I'm very sad and disappointed in them right now. They know they were wrong, and now they have to try to be better. Sophie fiddled with a loose thread on my shirt. Will you still come over and visit us? My heart squeezed. Of course, sweetheart. Nothing will stop me from being your grandpa. In fact, maybe we'll spend even more time together, okay? She smiled a little at that. Okay. You still owe me pie. I laughed softly, the tension easing a bit with her sweet innocence. That's right, I do. How about we all bake one together here, and then we can send a slice home for your mom and dad too. Maybe it will help everyone feel better. Lucas mustered a small smile at that. Dad does love your apple pie. I ruffled his hair gently. We'll make 2 pies. One for now and one for them. So we did. For a few hours that afternoon, we baked pies and played games, filling the house with laughter and giving ourselves a much-needed break from the turmoil. In that warmth of familial love, I felt something lighten in me. The hurt was still there, yes, and likely would be for a long time. But it was tempered by the realization that this, my bond with my grandchildren, was something my son's greed could never take away. In some ways, it might even be stronger now. Early in the evening, a car drove up. It was Michael, coming to retrieve the kids. I saw him step out and hesitate by the walkway, probably unsure if he'd be welcomed inside. I met him at the door. His eyes were downcast and red, like he'd been crying on and off all day. Before he could speak, I held out a plastic-wrapped half of an apple pie. "We made this. One for you and Claire." "And one for us," I said, nodding to the delicious smell wafting from the kitchen where the other pies sat half-eaten. He took the pie container gingerly. "Thank you," he whispered. There was a pause. He then looked at me, voice thick. "Dad." I don't even have words. I simply said, "Be good to them, Michael. And take this chance I'm giving you to turn things around." He nodded rapidly, blinking back tears. "I will. I swear I will." I believed he meant it in that moment. Only time would tell if he'd follow through. We didn't hug, that seemed too much right now. But as he turned to walk the kids to the car, Sophie ran back for one last squeeze around my waist. "Love you, Grandpa," she said. "I love you too, Pumpkin," I murmured, kissing the top of her head. Lucas shook my hand, trying to act grown up. "Thanks for everything, Grandpa." "Really?" His eyes conveyed the rest, admiration, gratitude, and concern. In his own way, he'd protect me too from now on, I sensed. After they left, I stood at the doorway for a long while, watching the sunset sky streaking orange and pink. It was a bittersweet view. My family had been fractured by betrayal and then, perhaps, pieced together differently by truth. Inside, my house felt calm. Not empty or lonely as I feared it might after such an emotional ordeal. Calm. The truth was out, boundaries set, and the future protected for those who truly mattered, the innocent ones. I sat down on my porch rocker with a tired sigh, a slice of warm apple pie on a plate in my hand. As I savored a bite, I felt a presence in the gentle evening breeze, almost as if Ellen was there beside me. In my mind, I heard her voice, loving and a little teasing. "I always knew you were strong enough to do the right thing, Ed." I smiled to myself, a tear escaping down my cheek, not of sadness exactly, but a complex mix of grief for what was lost and hope for what might still be saved. Whatever happened from here, I had my grandchildren's love unwavering, and they had mine. In that, I found solace and strength to carry on. And as the day gave way to dusk, I silently vowed to nurture that love and let it guide the healing of our family, one day at a time.
Hello everyone, and thank you for watching. I truly hope you enjoyed listening to the story as much as I enjoyed creating it. If you did, please consider liking the video and subscribing to the channel to help support the creation of more stories like this. Have a great day or evening.